Hi everyone, this is Joe Papano from FiberLink. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar on enabling Android devices in the enterprise. So we've got Andrew Schmanek from our customer engineering team here today to present. How you doing, Drew?
I'm good, thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thanks. This is Drew's first time presenting on one of our more webinars. So we're happy to have him, and just one thing I will tell you about Drew, he is my go-to guy here at FiberLink when I need an Android device rooted. So he's the guy that kind of knows all the little dirty secrets of Android, and if you've got some questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. Before we get started, a couple ground rules. If you've got questions, just send them in via QA or chat. We'll try to deal with them all at the end. The slides are going to be made available. You get an email about an hour from now with a link to where you can get the slides, and we'll have the recorded version of the webinar up at that same URL in about one day, so sometime tomorrow. So thanks for attending. First thing I want to do is really just kind of level set and talk a little bit about why we're all here. This is a refresh of some data from Morgan Stanley around the mobility space. And, it just kind of, highlights what we all already know, that, smartphones and the rate of adoption of them is incredible. And, of course, Android is fundamentally leading that charge. It's now the most popular smartphone tablet OS. And I think at least, back in July when Google had one of their investor calls, I think they quoted that they were activating 550,000 Android devices a day. So, that's just an absolutely incredible stat. And that's why I think it's important for all of us that are in the mobile operations space and the mobile device management space to make sure that we pay attention to this platform. We're not going to be able to ignore it. It's here, the market's embracing it, and obviously there's been some big changes recently that we'll maybe chat about at the end in the space. And, frankly, it's that market penetration and adoption rate that's why we all need to pay attention. So with that, we're going to open up our very first poll, and then I'll hand it over to Drew. So on our first poll, we're just asking, is the fragmentation in the ecosystem causing you to delay or postpone supporting Androids in your ecosystem? So if you could answer, thanks. We'll display the results when the poll closes. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Drew.
Thank you, Joe. So just to go over a little bit of items that you may learn today in the webinar, we're going to be discussing and embracing, Android opportunity in the enterprise and security, and taking a look at the best practices for them. We're also going to go over some new key features in newer updates of Gingerbread, which is Android 2.3, and also Honeycomb, which is Android 3.0 and above. And we'll also take a look at some Exchange Active Sync support as well. Okay? So we'll take a look at embracing the Android opportunity first. 2011 really was the brunt and the year the businesses first were confronted in the mobile device with the mobile device challenge. So this is only going to increase with concern in 2012. So we're going to look to figure out how this drags the IT department into the picture as users bring their own devices into the enterprise. Without proper IT management and strategy and operation, Androids and iPhones are really just being selected over the traditional BlackBerry model and also Windows devices. And from a recent study, the iPhone surpassed the BlackBerry as the top mobile device, and Android has quickly become the #1 OS across the board and continues to gain market share quarterly. So this is a good thing. Reason being, amazingly enough, businesses have reported, and there's case studies that shown employees work 10 to 20% more efficiently, and doing the night and weekend man hours when provided with just a laptop with corporate access. Another side to look at is businesses are also saving a lot of money, eliminating the contract and carrier agreements by allowing their corporate-owned devices to turn into employee-owned devices, where they take the responsibilities for the data and voice policies and the costs associated with that as well. So, as the notebook technology, struggles to keep ground, studies are still showing, this mobile device, this new frontier here with Android and iOS devices showing no signs of stopping.
And we're gonna start our second poll now, but I thought I would just kind of hit the results on the first poll. So more than a third of the people, a little bit more than a third, said that fragmentation was kind of delaying this. Now we actually asked that same polling question back in January, the last time we presented this topic, and the actual results were actually exactly the opposite of this. So at that time, 2/3 of the people that were on that webinar said they were delaying or postponing an Android rollout because of fragmentation, and now here we are, I don't know, 7 months later, and that sentiment has flipped around. So that's pretty interesting, and I think is a good sign for Android and kind of corporations' kind of view on embracing it. So I'm going to open up our second poll now, and here what we're really asking are, among the major providers or manufacturers of Android devices, which ones of your organization supports Android are you supporting?
Yes, so what we're going to look at the next slide here and discuss, some security best practices. And really, the best way around that is to have a realistic policy set for the up-and-coming year here. We're looking at 2012. We want to support multiple device platforms, but yet allow personal devices as well. So you're likely already doing this now, but some possible, very little, minimal information around ActiveSync or how Android and iOS devices are syncing around and receiving corporate data. Also, another thing to incorporate in your plan is a cost-saving structure, which can, also add up as an employee, is covering their own voice and data plan. Another thing to look at is to really take stock of your mobile devices by implementing a multi-platform reporting inventory tool. This is going to help you understand risk regarding the mobile devices and, make them more informed decisions. The solution should also be extended to your help desk and HR departments, just to kind of scale in. You get a general consensus of how many devices are really accessing corporate data. I'd say probably the most important is just to require and enforce basic security precautions. So requiring strong password expiration, auto lock, and auto wipe. If a specific number of number of failures are taking place on the device, it will be wiped of the corporate information as well. With newer updates, agnostic around some of the Motorola devices with 2.3, there has been some encryption options where you can encrypt the internal and external SD card. So, very, very interesting to take some precautions with that. And then natively 3.0 Honeycomb supports that. So.
And one thing here, the pace kind of updates to Android slowed down a little bit, which is probably a good thing in the sense of they need to kind of catch their breath and catch up to where some of the other frankly, where iOS was. But I guess what we'd say here explicitly is if you're running versions of Android earlier than 2.2, they're really not enterprise ready, and so that's kind of what we consider to be the baseline for an enterprise ready version of Android that you could realistically at least make sure these basic security precautions that Drew's listed here are enforced on. So that's kind of one quick kind of just rule of the road around support for Android.
Yes. So as Android does struggle to natively catch up, we'll kind of take a look when Gingerbread was first launched here, and then we'll go over the features. So when Gingerbread's first launched, we saw faster speed with more efficient UI. The code ran faster, it was cleaner. We also saw new application management with the newly integrated downloads app to manage the the downloads application outside of just going into the market in previous versions. And then we're now seeing some encryption come down from the OEM vendors, such as Motorola, taking strides to kind of level off Android in the enterprise space, allowing those additional options. As the tablets, do support the native encryption, we are seeing some steps in this direction as well. So we want to take a look at also the UI refresh that we did see in 2.3. So we saw a new color scheme, a new color scheme, a new keyboard, and also improved cut and paste functionality. But we are seeing NFC devices being equipped. So this will help in the long run with some the Nexus lines that are driven developer-based phones that are continuing to push the limits of hardware, and then allowing NFC support to read tags and embed it in a poster or sticker or advertisements. So in the future there have been discussions around using NFC technology for making payments as well.
And I've actually had a couple of Android devices in my life. I had a Samsung Galaxy S, and I've got an HTC Desire right now. And I just got pushed the 2.3 upgrade through HTC and AT&T, I guess about 2 weeks ago. And I got to admit, it is nice, and I don't want to, frankly, provide a commercial for anyone, but I really do like the HTC device. It's really nice.
Yes. Yep. You'll see a lot of limitations with certain devices, but as the carriers and the OEMs have agreements to catch up, you'll see newer implementations of the newer flavors of Android. So just to go over some features we saw in 3.0, when it first launched, it was a completely new UI for Android tablets. But some of the bigger changes were the native tab browsing that you saw in the stock browser, and then we saw a new two-pane UI that was exclusive to 3.0 for browsing email with the higher resolution. In the update 1 there, we saw support for external peripherals being implemented for like keyboards and pointing devices and other gaming peripherals as well. But more important was the Wi-Fi lock, which maintained a Wi-Fi connection even when the device was at sleep or the screen was off. We also saw support for some HTTP proxy for connected Wi-Fi access points as well. Update 2 for Honeycomb, we saw some compatibility display mode changes for applications that have not yet, or were not yet optimized for the tablet screen resolutions. And we also saw new DisplayPort functions that gave developers more control over the look and feel on different Android devices as well.
Hey, I don't know if you know this, Drew, but I'll ask, and maybe if somebody out there knows. Do you know what Google's plans are in terms of merging the kind of the smartphone branch with the tablet branch? Is that planned or not?
Yes, so with Ice Cream Sandwich and 4.0, we could see some exciting things here. We could see, them streamlining 3.0 features into, the new 4.0 that they're coming out with. Currently, there are no versions of that available for testing, and they're kind of under wraps. But as soon as we get a hold of them, we'll actually probably have another webinar around the newer features with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that at least anyone who's comparing iOS to Android, especially for the smartphone, form factor always hits on is the iOS support for encryption that just isn't there yet for Android smartphones.
Yes. So they are treading some water in that light.
And that's kind of going to lead into kind of our next polling question here. So Android smartphones, at least, don't really have pervasive kind of support for device-level encryption, and so there's a lot of software-based solutions for that, primarily Touchdown by NitroDesk's the one I'm most familiar with. So we wanted to ask folks on the call here if they could tell us what email clients are being used, and I would assume that besides kind of the ease of use of the commercially available products versus the native Android email client, which isn't that great, the other thing folks are probably really looking for is some level of encryption support, at least for attachments and data stored to SD cards.
Yes. So now, the next few slides here, we're going to take a look at the Microsoft Exchange support. some of the requirements for that, is really just to prepare and see what your environment, what you have in your environment at first. So we'll take a look at some Exchange ActiveSync 2003, Microsoft Exchange ActiveSync 2007, and then Exchange ActiveSync 2010. So being that you can tether ActiveSync devices or tie them into your Exchange server, we're going to take a look at the requirements for them. There's some supported features, so adding existing Exchange user accounts via ActiveSync server and enforcement of the mailbox policies, and then the synchronization of the email calendar events and contacts. You also get on the device with ActiveSync devices, you get the auto completion of email addresses in the email, and then auto discovery of the ActiveSync server. So you'll see your devices come in, and you'll see auto discovery of maybe some additional ones like the Windows mobile devices or some Symbian devices that are ActiveSync enabled, but you may not normally traditionally be alerted upon. So you'll see them in ActiveSync. Okay. So some additional features is requiring some passcode in your security policy. If you set this to ActiveSync mailbox policy, the users need to secure their phones using a numeric PIN or alphanumeric password. And then using the PIN or password option in Android 2.2 or above, the screen unlock security settings. So getting around that pattern lock. Another ActiveSync mailbox policies really have no effect on this policy if it's not set. So meaning that the most secure policy will take precedence.
Hey, one quick thing. So a question just kind of popped in here when we were kind of focused on Microsoft Exchange, which is, what are the options for Lotus Notes? So, MAS 360, our mobile device management platform, I can really only speak for it, can integrate with Microsoft Exchange or Lotus Notes, and the component in Notes is called Traveler,
yes,
to manage devices via the ActiveSync protocol, which is fundamentally kind of what Drew's laid out here. So the capabilities are fundamentally the same on both platforms in terms of what you can manage and what types of policies you can set and enforce for mobile devices that you plan to manage through that type of messaging infrastructure, which is almost always built, using, which frankly they all use ActiveSync now.
Yes.
The support's about the same, so you could, in this case, substitute Lotus Notes or Microsoft Exchange. It wouldn't matter. They both support ActiveSync. And if you're interested, we did a webinar 2 weeks ago on kind of some tips and techniques for how to best manage devices via ActiveSync, and the recording's up on the Master Center, which we'll talk about at the end of the webinar. But if you want to find out more about it, I'd kind of encourage you to go look at that webinar.
Yes. And just to go into more, support for the security policies, the number of failed passcode attempts allowed. So the ActiveSync mailbox policy set, it sets the maximum number of times the user, can enter an incorrect passcode or a password before the phone resets itself to factory defaults, which is also known as a local wipe. Android 2.2 and above supports a maximum of 31 failed passcode attempts for this setting. We also take a look at the minimum password length. So ActiveSync mailbox, the policy sets a minimum number of letters or numbers for a PIN or password, and Android 2.2 or above supports PINs and passwords of up to 16 characters. This screen timeout, and to just go over that, is just the time without the user input before the password must be re-entered. So with ActiveSync, the policy sets the maximum number in minutes after a user has last touched the screen or pressed the lock button before the phone locked itself. So requiring would be to have the user to unlock the phone with a PIN or password. And then on Android 2.2 or above phones, this restricts the screen timeout setting to a duration less than or equal to the value of the policy that you set. So Android 2.2 and above supports, the maximum of 30 minutes for that setting. So wanted to take a look at the non-provisionable devices, and then kind of go over the ActiveSync mailbox policy controls, and this kind of controls whether the devices that do not support your mailbox policies can synchronize information with your Exchange server. So if all your mailbox policies are supported by Android 2.2 or above, as described in this section, this policy would have no effect on Android 2.2 phones. So, some of your mailbox policies are not supported by 2.2, and you set this policy, users then can add Exchange accounts to their phones, synchronize information, get corporate data, and then Android 2.2 would enforce those your policies that it does support. So if some of your mailbox policies are not supported in Android 2.2, then you don't need to set this setting. But users, would not be able to add Exchange accounts to their phones, and any existing accounts would be prevented from syncing.
So, what we're kind of hitting on here is, frankly, most companies have either Exchange or Notes. I know there's some folks out there with GroupWise, but, this is obviously the easiest way to enable, some kind of push mail with some basic MDM capabilities out to a mobile device like an Android, although certainly it'll work with iOS, Windows Mobile, any endpoint that can support the ActiveSync protocol. However, there is another way to manage at least Android and iOS devices through MAS 360, which we call the kind of the direct method, where we actually are installing software, FiberLink's installing software on the Android devices that give you a lot more capabilities than what you get with Android, with Exchange ActiveSync. And that's just something you should keep in the back of your mind, that obviously an easy way to get started with MDM and with mobility itself is just turning on ActiveSync on your Exchange server, letting folks partner up with their mailbox to start getting their email. There's some basic things you can do. Drew's kind of walking you through them right now, and he's going to kind of get into more of it in a couple minutes, what more you can do with Exchange. But we would say that's what we would call kind of mobile device management 101. It's basic. There's some holes. That webinar I referenced that we did a couple weeks ago talks about what some of those things are in more detail. But there is certainly another level of management and security available that makes it easier to do things like support an employee-owned device, because, for example, ActiveSync only supports a full device wipe, which is, frankly, going to wipe the entire device, any personal information that's on it, anything else. That may not be a great thing for your end users, but if you run in the more advanced mode where MAS 360's directly managing the device, you can do what we call selective wipe, which removes all of the corporate information or corporate profiles, but leaves all the employee data intact on the device. So just kind of some things to keep in mind about why you should want to go in one direction versus the other, and what are the benefits.
Yeah, so, and just to go over the remote wipe, so if you do establish a mailbox policy on the Exchange ActiveSync